What would you do if your entire world shattered in a single doctor's appointment? Today's story follows Sarah Mitchell, a mother whose journey through her son's illness reveals the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy. Discover how ancient teachings can guide us through modern storms, transforming pain into purpose and fear into fortitude. The morning sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of Boston Children's Hospital, casting striped shadows across Sarah Mitchell's trembling hands. Her 7-year-old son, Tommy, sat on the examination table, his legs swinging back and forth with the carefree rhythm of childhood. The paper beneath him crinkled with each movement, a sound that would forever echo in Sarah's memory as the soundtrack to the moment before everything changed. Dr. Henderson's words hung in the air like heavy fog. The tests confirm it's leukemia. The diagnosis landed like a physical blow, momentarily stealing the breath from Sarah's lungs. Tommy, still too young to fully grasp the weight of the word, continued his gentle swinging, now preoccupied with a loose thread on his Spider-Man t-shirt. Sarah's mind raced through 1,000 thoughts in mere seconds. Single mother, freelance graphic designer, barely making ends meet. And now this. The universe seemed to be testing her limits, pushing her toward a breaking point she'd always feared existed within her. But there, in that sterile room with its 2 bright lights and antiseptic smell, something else stirred in Sarah's consciousness. Words from an old book she'd discovered during her darkest days after Tom's father left them. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. Marcus Aurelius's wisdom, discovered during lonely nights of searching for meaning, now whispered to her like a lifeline in a storm. As Dr. Henderson continued explaining treatment options, Sarah felt an unusual sensation beneath her fear, a quiet, steady strength beginning to take root. She remembered another Stoic teaching. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control our response to it. Looking at Tommy's innocent face, she made a decision that would define their journey ahead. She would face this challenge not just with courage, but with wisdom. The hospital corridor outside buzzed with activity, nurses hurrying past, phones ringing at the station, other parents walking with their own burdens. But within Sarah, a transformation had begun. This was not just a story of illness. It was about to become a testament to the power of ancient wisdom in modern crisis. In the weeks following the diagnosis, Sarah's apartment in Cambridge transformed into a command center of sorts. Medical pamphlets covered the coffee table, and a large calendar on the wall tracked appointments and medication schedules with color-coded precision. Tommy's treatment protocol lay beside her laptop, dog-eared and highlighted, like a battle plan for the war they never chose to fight. During her lunch breaks at the local cafe where she worked on her freelance projects, Sarah found herself returning to the writings of Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The words resonated differently now, taking on practical meaning in her daily struggles. The first chemotherapy session tested everything she thought she knew about strength. Tommy's small frame seemed even tinier in the treatment chair, his usual energetic chatter subdued by the drugs flowing into his system. Sarah maintained her composure, reading him stories about brave knights and clever wizards, while internally repeating another Stoic mantra, "This too shall pass." Her sister Rachel, watching from the doorway during a visit, marveled at Sarah's composure. "I don't know how you're staying so strong," she said one evening as they watched Tommy sleep. Sarah smiled softly, thinking of Seneca's words about adversity being an opportunity to practice virtue. "I'm not always strong," Sarah admitted, "but I'm learning that strength isn't about not feeling fear or pain. It's about acknowledging them without letting them control you." She looked at the small meditation corner she'd created in her bedroom, where a journal filled with Stoic quotes and her own reflections helped anchor her thoughts each morning. The autumn leaves were turning golden when Sarah received the first significant test of her newfound philosophical foundation. Tommy's blood counts had dropped dangerously low, requiring an emergency hospital admission. As she rushed through the hospital's sliding doors, carrying her son's favorite dinosaur pajamas in one hand and gripping his small, feverish body with the other, Sarah felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. In the pediatric intensive care unit, under the harsh fluorescent lights, a young resident attempted to insert an IV line into Tommy's collapsed veins. After the third failed attempt, Tommy's sobs echoed through the room, and Sarah felt her heart constricting. The resident looked up apologetically. "We might need to try again." In that moment, Sarah remembered Marcus Aurelius's words about perspective. Choose to see things differently. Instead of letting panic overwhelm her, she took a deep breath and focused on what she could control. She began humming Tommy's favorite lullaby, the same one she'd sung to him as a baby. Her voice, steady despite her fear, filled the room. "Mom," Tommy whispered between sniffles. "Tommy, tell me about the brave warriors again." Sarah smiled, recognizing his request for the Stoic stories she'd been adapting into child-friendly tales. As she spoke about ancient philosophers who faced their challenges with courage, the medical team successfully placed the IV, and Tommy's grip on her hand gradually relaxed. Later that night, as Tommy slept surrounded by beeping monitors, Sarah opened her journal. "Today," she wrote, "I understood that being a Stoic parent doesn't mean being emotionless. It means channeling emotions into purposeful action." The first significant turning point came during a routine oncology appointment in early December. Dr. Henderson's face carried an unusual tension as she reviewed Tommy's latest test results. "The standard protocol isn't producing the response we hoped for," she explained, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk. "We need to consider enrolling Tommy in a clinical trial at Dana-Farber." The word trial hit Sarah like an icy wind. Her mind raced to the medical journals she'd been studying late at night, where clinical trials often represented both hope and uncertainty. Tommy sat beside her, absorbed in his tablet, blissfully unaware of the conversation's gravity. Sarah's first instinct was to panic, but she caught herself, remembering Epictetus's teaching. It's not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about these things. Instead of seeing the trial as a sign of failure, she forced herself to view it as what it truly was. Another path forward. What exactly would this trial involve? Sarah asked, her voice steadier than she felt. As Dr. Henderson outlined the experimental treatment's details, Sarah noticed something she hadn't before. A small meditations quote framed on the doctor's desk. "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Their eyes met in a moment of mutual recognition. Dr. Henderson smiled slightly. "You know Marcus Aurelius?" "He's been helping me through this," Sarah replied, feeling an unexpected connection with her son's doctor, along with Epictetus and Seneca. "Then you understand," Dr. Henderson said softly, "that sometimes what appears to be a setback is actually an opportunity for something better." The decision to enroll Tommy in the clinical trial triggered a cascade of changes. Their weekly routine shifted to accommodate more frequent hospital visits at Dana-Farber, and Sarah found herself navigating a maze of new insurance paperwork and trial protocols. Her freelance work hours dwindled as Tommy's care demanded more attention. One evening, while Tommy was building a Lego hospital, just like the one where I get my super soldier serum, "Mom," Sarah received an email that made her stomach drop. Her biggest client was going in a different direction due to her decreased availability. The loss of this income would hit hard, especially with mounting medical expenses. In her meditation corner that night, Sarah pulled out her worn copy of Seneca's letters. "Apply reason to difficulties," she read aloud, her finger tracing the underlined words. Instead of succumbing to anxiety, she opened her laptop and began researching remote work opportunities that offered more flexibility. The next morning, during Tommy's treatment session, she met Elena, another trial participant's mother. Eleanor worked in tech and mentioned her company was looking for remote graphic designers. "They're very understanding about parents with medical situations," Eleanor explained, sharing her company's contact information. As Tommy dozed under the influence of his treatment, Sarah reflected on how the Stoics viewed unexpected changes. "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it," Marcus Aurelius had written. She looked at her sleeping son, his baseball cap covering his now bare head, and saw not loss, but transformation. That evening, she updated her portfolio while Tommy played with his new hospital Lego set. "Mom, look," he called out. "I made a special room for brave warriors." Sarah smiled, recognizing her Stoic story's influence on his imagination. January brought record-breaking snowfall to Boston, complicating their thrice-weekly hospital visits. During one particularly treacherous morning commute, Sarah's aging Honda refused to start. Standing in the freezing parking lot, watching her breath form clouds in the air, she felt the weight of yet another obstacle. But before panic could set in, her neighbor Mike, a retired Marine who'd recently started attending her newly formed neighborhood support group, pulled up in his SUV. "Hop in," he called out. "I heard the car struggling earlier and figured you might need backup." This unexpected act of kindness led to the formation of an informal transportation network among the support group members. Sarah had started the group after reading Heracles' Circles of Concern, adapting the Stoic concept of expanding circles of compassion into practical community action. Meanwhile, at Dana-Farber, Tommy's participation in the trial was yielding unexpected benefits beyond his treatment. His natural curiosity about the medical equipment and procedures caught the attention of Dr. Zhang, a research fellow who began explaining the science behind the treatments in kid-friendly terms. These conversations sparked a new interest in science for Tommy, giving him something to focus on beyond his illness. However, a new challenge emerged when Tommy's school principal expressed concerns about his extended absences. Despite the home tutoring arrangement, the suggestion of holding Tommy back a year hit Sarah hard. That evening, as she prepared Tommy's medications, she remembered Epictetus's advice about focusing on what's within our control. "We can't control the school's policies," she wrote in her journal, "but we can control how we approach Tommy's education during this time." This realization led her to explore alternative learning methods, including virtual education programs designed for children with medical needs. A late February evening brought an unexpected visitor to the Mitchells' apartment. Tom Sr., Tommy's father, stood awkwardly in their doorway, having learned about his son's condition through mutual friends. His sudden appearance after 3 years of absence created a complex emotional tableau. Tommy, excited yet confused, showed his father his collection of medical badges, little awards he'd earned for each treatment milestone. Sarah watched the interaction from the kitchen, her mind returning to Epictetus's teaching about dealing with difficult people. When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. The situation tested Sarah's growing Stoic practice. Her initial impulse to shield Tommy from potential disappointment warred with the philosophy's emphasis on accepting what we cannot control. Tom Sr.'s presence represented exactly the kind of external circumstance that Stoicism taught her to handle with equanimity. During his visit, Tom Sr. revealed he'd been through his own struggles, completing rehabilitation for alcohol addiction. He expressed genuine remorse and a desire to support Tommy through his treatment. Sarah found herself in a moral dilemma, balancing protection of her son with the potential benefits of having his father involved. That night, after Tommy had fallen asleep clutching the new science book his father had brought, Sarah sat in her meditation corner. She recalled Marcus Aurelius's words about justice and mercy. "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Her response to Tom's return would need to prioritize Tommy's well-being while practicing the Stoic virtues of wisdom and justice. She decided to allow supervised visits, setting clear boundaries while remaining open to the possibility of positive change, a decision that aligned with both maternal instinct and philosophical principle. March arrived with unsettling news. During a routine checkup, Dr. Henderson noticed concerning patterns in Tommy's latest blood work. While the trial medication had initially shown promise, there were signs of resistance developing. The medical team needed to make a decision: continue with the current protocol or pivot to an even more experimental treatment option. The timing couldn't have been worse. Sarah had just started her new remote position, and Tom Sr. had become a semi-regular presence in their lives, creating a delicate balance. The prospect of another treatment change threatened to destabilize everything they'd carefully built. During a tense meeting with the medical team, Sarah noticed her hands shaking as she took notes. Dr. Zhang presented data charts showing Tommy's response rates, while Dr. Henderson outlined the risks and benefits of each option. The weight of the decision pressed down like a physical force. In that moment, Sarah remembered Epictetus's warning against being overwhelmed by circumstances. It's not the events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out her journal and began methodically listing what was within her control and what wasn't. The situation grew more complex when Tom Sr. strongly advocated for the more aggressive treatment option, while Sarah leaned toward a more measured approach. Their differing views created tension that Tommy, despite his young age, clearly sensed. That evening, as Tommy played with his favorite microscope, a gift from Dr. Zhang, Sarah caught him pretending to be a doctor, treating his stuffed animals. "Sometimes the first medicine doesn't work," he explained to his teddy bear, "but that's okay because brave warriors try again." His innocent wisdom, unknowingly echoing Stoic principles, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. As April bloomed, bringing new life to Boston's parks, the Mitchell family found themselves navigating uncharted waters. The decision to try the more experimental treatment had been made, and Tommy was now part of an even smaller, more intensive trial group. Sarah's support group had grown, becoming a lifeline not just for her, but for many local families facing similar challenges. One evening, as they gathered in a community center, Sarah found herself sharing Stoic principles almost unconsciously. "We can't control the outcome," she told Elena, whose daughter had recently relapsed, "but we can control our actions and attitudes." Meanwhile, Tom Sr.'s involvement had evolved in unexpected ways. His own journey through recovery had given him insights that proved valuable in supporting Tommy through difficult treatment days. Sarah observed with a mixture of gratitude and caution as father and son rebuilt their bond over shared interests in science and baseball. At Dana-Farber, Dr. Zhang had taken Tommy under his wing, turning treatment sessions into impromptu science lessons. Tommy's growing knowledge impressed even veteran nurses, and his resilience inspired other young patients. Sarah realized her son was not just enduring his illness, but finding purpose within it, a living embodiment of the Stoic principle of turning obstacles into opportunities. However, the strain of balancing work, Tommy's care, and her own emotional well-being was taking its toll on Sarah. One night, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and hospital visits, she found herself staring at her reflection, barely recognizing the exhausted woman looking back at her. In that moment, she remembered Seneca's words about self-care. "We must go for walks out of doors, so that the mind can be strengthened and invigorated by a clear sky and plenty of fresh air." As summer approached, the fragile balance Sarah had maintained began to fracture under mounting pressures. Tommy's response to the new treatment was inconsistent, causing increased anxiety for everyone involved. The medical team spoke in hushed tones about diminishing options, their faces etched with concern during consultations. One sweltering afternoon, Sarah received an urgent call from her employer. Despite their initial understanding, her frequent absences were becoming problematic. She was given an ultimatum: increase her hours or risk losing her position. The timing couldn't have been worse, as Tommy's care demands were intensifying. Simultaneously, Tom Sr.'s renewed presence in their lives brought unexpected complications. His well-intentioned but sometimes misguided attempts to help often clashed with the carefully structured routine Sarah had established. Their differing approaches to Tommy's care led to heated arguments, straining their co-parenting relationship. The situation reached a boiling point during a crucial medical consultation. As Dr. Henderson presented a new, high-risk treatment option, Tom Sr. and Sarah found themselves at odds. Their disagreement escalated, voices rising until Tommy, pale and tired on the examination table, burst into tears. In that moment, Sarah felt her stoic resolve waver. The weight of endless decisions, the constant battle against fear, and the relentless march of time seemed to crash down upon her all at once. She excused herself, stumbling into the hospital corridor, gasping for breath. Leaning against the cool wall, she closed her eyes, desperately searching for the calm center she had worked so hard to cultivate. In her mind, she heard Marcus Aurelius's words, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Taking a deep breath, Sarah straightened up. She knew the next steps would require every ounce of wisdom and courage she could muster. The following week brought Sarah face to face with a series of pivotal decisions. In a bold move, she approached her employer with a proposal for a restructured work arrangement, leveraging her growing network in the patient support community to suggest innovative remote work solutions. It was a risk, but one she felt compelled to take. Meanwhile, the tension with Tom Sr. reached a breaking point. After another disagreement over Tommy's care, Sarah decided it was time for a frank conversation. Drawing on Epictetus's teachings about clear communication and focusing on what one can control, she invited Tom to meet at a neutral location, a quiet park near the hospital. Under the shade of an old oak tree, Sarah spoke with a calmness that surprised even her. "We need to find a way to work together," she began, "not for our sakes, but for Tommy's." She outlined her concerns, acknowledged Tom's efforts, and proposed a structured co-parenting plan that aligned with Tommy's medical needs. Tom, initially defensive, gradually softened as Sarah's words sank in. "I've been trying to make up for lost time," he admitted, "but I realize I've been causing more chaos than help." Their conversation, though difficult, laid the groundwork for a more cooperative approach. Back at the hospital, Sarah faced her most challenging decision yet. Dr. Henderson presented a last resort treatment option, a cutting-edge immunotherapy with significant risks, but also the potential for a breakthrough. The decision had to be made quickly as Tommy's condition was deteriorating. In this crucial moment, Sarah found herself drawing on every Stoic lesson she had internalized over the past months. She gathered Tommy's medical team, Tom, and even invited Tommy himself to be part of the discussion, believing that even at his young age, he deserved a voice in his own care. The decision to proceed with the high-risk immunotherapy treatment plunged the Mitchells into the most intense phase of their journey yet. Tommy was admitted to a specialized unit in the hospital, his small body now connected to an array of machines and monitors that beeped incessantly, marking each precious moment. Sarah practically lived in the hospital room, sleeping on a cot beside Tommy's bed. Her days blurred into a routine of talking with doctors, comforting Tommy through waves of side effects, and stealing moments to work on her laptop when he slept. The Stoic practices that had sustained her were now being tested to their very limits. One particularly harrowing night, Tommy's fever spiked dangerously high. As medical staff rushed in and out, Sarah found herself pushed to the corner of the room, watching helplessly as they worked to stabilize her son. In this moment of crisis, she clung to Marcus Aurelius's words, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Tom Sr., who had been taking night shifts to allow Sarah some rest, arrived to find the room in chaos. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded space, a look of shared fear and determination passing between them. Despite their past differences, they stood united in their concern for Tommy. As dawn broke, bringing with it a tentative stability to Tommy's condition, Sarah stepped out of the room for a moment of solitude. In the quiet corridor, she pulled out her worn journal, its pages now filled with months of reflections, quotes, and hard-won wisdom. She wrote, her hand shaking slightly, "Today, we face our greatest test. But remember, the obstacle is the way. The coming hours would determine everything." Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. The pivotal moment arrived on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after Tommy's initial diagnosis. Dr. Henderson entered the room, her face unreadable as she carried the latest test results. Sarah and Tom stood on either side of Tommy's bed, their hands instinctively finding each other's in a moment of unspoken unity. "Tommy," Dr. Henderson began, her voice soft but clear, "I need you to be brave for a moment longer." She turned to the parents. "The immunotherapy, it's working. The cancer cells are responding, diminishing at a rate we hadn't dared hope for." The room seemed to hold its breath. Tommy, weak but alert, was the first to break the silence. "Does this mean I beat the bad guys, Mom?" he asked, his voice small but filled with a child's innate hope. Sarah felt a surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Joy, relief, disbelief. They all clamored for attention. But in this crucial moment, she remembered Epictetus's teaching. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Taking a deep breath, she squeezed Tom's hand and smiled at her son. "You've been so brave, Tommy. So very brave. And yes, it looks like you're winning this battle." Dr. Henderson continued explaining the road ahead. More treatments, careful monitoring, potential challenges. But her words seemed to float in the background as Sarah observed the scene before her. Tom, tears streaming down his face, hugging Tommy gently. The nurses outside, some wiping their eyes as they heard the news. And Tommy, his face a mix of exhaustion and triumph, holding onto his favorite science book like a talisman. In this moment of victory, Sarah realized that their journey had transformed them all. The Stoic principles that had guided her through the darkest times now illuminated a path forward, one of gratitude, resilience, and unwavering hope. In the months that followed Tommy's breakthrough, life for the Mitchells slowly shifted into a new normal. Tommy's strength returned gradually, his appetite for both food and knowledge growing with each passing day. Sarah watched in awe as her son, once tethered to hospital beds, now bounded through the park, his laughter a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The journey had left its mark on all of them. Sarah's freelance career had evolved, her experiences inspiring her to create designs for medical education materials and patient support resources. Tom Sr., humbled and changed by the ordeal, had become a steady presence in Tommy's life, his own recovery journey intertwining with his son's healing process. One crisp spring afternoon, as they sat on a bench watching Tommy play with friends, a scene that once seemed an impossible dream, Sarah reflected on the profound impact of Stoic philosophy on their lives. The teachings that had once been abstract concepts in ancient texts had become living, breathing practices that guided them through their darkest hours. She thought of Seneca's words, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." Their family had been forged in the crucible of adversity, emerging stronger, more compassionate, and deeply appreciative of life's precious moments. As Tommy ran up to them, his cheeks flushed with excitement, Sarah saw in his eyes not just the joy of a child at play, but the wisdom of a young soul who had faced life's greatest challenges and emerged victorious. In that moment, she knew that the Stoic principles of courage, wisdom, justice, and self-control would continue to guide their family, not just in times of crisis, but in the everyday moments that make up a life well lived. The future, once shrouded in fear and uncertainty, now held the promise of countless new adventures, each one an opportunity to apply the timeless wisdom they had embraced. And here we conclude another story filled with emotion and Stoic lessons. The journey of Sarah, Tommy, and their family reminds us that even in our darkest hours, ancient wisdom can light the way forward. Their story isn't just about overcoming illness, it's about finding strength, purpose, and peace in the face of life's greatest challenges. Remember, we all face our own battles, big and small. The Stoic principles that guided Sarah, focusing on what we can control, finding opportunity in obstacles, and maintaining equanimity in the face of adversity, are tools available to each of us in our daily lives. To not miss out on future videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us and help spread these valuable lessons to others who might need them. For those of you eager to dive deeper into Stoic philosophy and its practical applications in modern life, I've included an excellent book recommendation in the video description and in the pinned comment below. It's a fantastic starting point for anyone looking to incorporate these timeless principles into their own lives. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Remember, in the words of Marcus Aurelius, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, and keep growing.